becomes meaningless, because this country, the fact of the matter is, this country has the largest nuclear arsenal, and this country has indicated through its administration recently that it may actually look again at testing nuclear weapons. So you're not going to have a meaningful treaty. The other nuclear weapon states aren't going to abide by it if the United States is not going to abide by it. If you look at the International Criminal Court, again, without the United States as the world's leading democracy taking a leading role in this, you're going to have a much weakened court. Now, the rest of us have decided that we're going to go ahead with it anyway, because we believe that history shows that if you don't have an international court and you rely on ad hoc tribunals and dealing with cases as they arise, it doesn't actually have any impact. And I mean, if you look at the atrocities, the horrors that have been committed over recent years, when there hasn't been a world court, the horrors that were conducted in the Balkans, the horrors that were conducted in Sierra Leone, children having their limbs cut off as a way of punishing a particular tribal group, the horrors that have been conducted around all parts of the world. No one can argue that the existing system has acted effectively to prevent these sort of horrors. We believe that an international criminal court, which we're also subject to, is the only effective way of dealing with these horrors. If you look too at the human rights area, you face a similar dilemma. My country is a small country, a democratic country, a country that is committed to the rule of law, that is committed to international human rights, is party to all of the international human rights treaties. We also accept international scrutiny of our human rights. In other words, we accept international bodies being able to look at human rights in New Zealand, tell us whether we're doing a good job or a bad job, and tell us where we need to improve. We accept those obligations not because we believe that we have weak human rights in New Zealand. We don't. But if we want to ask other countries in the world to accept this sort of scrutiny, we've got to do it ourselves. You can't just say to those countries who you think have bad human rights, you've got to allow the international community to look at you, but we're not prepared to allow the international community to look at us. The only way of advancing international human rights is to establish international rules, international systems of inspection that apply to everyone. And I think that if you look at what the United Nations and the members of the United Nations have, led by the United States, have achieved over the last 50 years in this area, I think it's been immense. If you look at the movement towards democracy internationally, if you look at the movement towards human rights internationally, it has been immense. And the United States, during the Cold War period, led the way. Now, unfortunately, with the end of the Cold War period, the United States has increasingly pulled back from that. And you don't read about it very much in the newspapers unless you read the op-ed pages of the New York Times. But what you have in the United Nations is a situation where the United States, on matters like international human rights, votes increasingly with the countries who it describes as the axis of evil. And I know it was very taken by a comment in the New York Times where it described the US and a number of countries from the Middle East as the axis of medieval, because a number of the positions that are being taken on issues such as children's rights, women's rights, issues such as torture, you have a small group of countries, including this one, aligned with countries like Syria, like Iraq, like Libya, which frankly is quite extraordinary. Now, this is happening for domestic political reasons, and I don't want to get into that. But my concern is that what this does is when the leading democracy in the world takes this position, it inevitably undermines these international norms that certainly I very much believe in. I think that that international law and that international human rights face some quite real risks at the moment. I think that international disarmament and the progress in that area faces some quite real risks at the moment as well. Obviously, including from countries like Iraq, which is being brought to account by the Security Council. But I think we're actually moving into quite a difficult period and quite a dangerous period. And I sometimes wonder whether this is clearly perceived across the globe, as it is certainly perceived by many of us in the United Nations. So I'll stop there. I'm sorry I've gone on for good heavens, it's 11:45. I'm sorry about that.
Sure, that's fine. Okay.